So we wanted a little bit of an inside, in-depth discussion of this past legislative session. It's been like no other. It's gone down in history for a lot of reasons. But we have State Senator Eric Lucero, Senator Mark Horan, we have State Representatives Pam Altendorf, Elliot Engen, and Walter Hudson tonight. Isn't that great? They're all sitting right here. So each are going to come up in the order that I call them, and they're going to speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, and it's their choice. They can tell us what's been going on, or maybe a couple pieces of legislation, just something they want to share with us. And then all 5 will be up here on stage for questions and answers. So that will be your time then to line up here. And when you do come up with a question, you probably should only direct the question not to all 5, but maybe just 1 or 2, or however any of you 5 want to answer it. Maybe 1 or 2 of you will want to jump in and just say something. But we do kind of want to know, we want you to share inside scoop here. We want to know what to expect going forward as well. So we're just so glad they were all able to be here. And I'm first going to introduce Senator Eric Lucero. He represents Senate District 30. He's been here before at St. Michael, Elberville, Otsego, Nowland, and surrounding townships. And his committee assignments are education, finance, energy, utilities, environment, and climate. And you're the ranking minority member of the Housing and Homeless Prevention. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. It is always an honor and a privilege to be invited out here. And I just want to thank Mary Emla once again. She is one of the hardest working grassroots patriots in this state who goes corner to corner, organizing events like this, trying to get information out, because we need to act. We need to band together, fight for the truth, fight for the values, the principles that not only this great country was founded on, but are what are going to allow us to pass the torch to the next generation. Mary Emla is one of those leaders, and we are all here tonight because of the efforts that she continues to do. So let's just give her another round. Again, it's always an honor to be here, speaking to such great people, because you care about the future, and that's why you, again, continue to show up. 5 minutes goes really fast, so I'm going to just go down a list of the things that I want to highlight, and this is just a partial list of some of the terrible legislation that was enacted into law. And then I'm going to allow my colleagues to get into some of the details, but I wanted to just give a high-level overview. So as you know, the Democrat majority had a one seat vote in the Senate. And they rammed through the most extreme, divisive agenda that this state has ever seen. In fact, I have a quote here from Speaker Hortman just released a Q&A that she had with some reporters, and in that, the answers, she gave the following. We did exactly what Minnesotans asked us to do. Our intensive conversations with Minnesotans on the campaign trail about what they wanted. This is, the result that we just saw over the last 5 months is not what they campaigned on. It is not the conversations that they had. Many of the legislation that they pushed through were not at all what was being spoken of. So here is just a partial list of some of the items. So we know we went into this session with a nearly $20 billion state budget surplus, which represents overtaxation. But based on that, that wasn't enough. So they spent all of that and more, and just spending that and the additional dollars, 40% increase in state spending, 40. The $1,000 checks per person that Governor Walz campaigned on is now $260 per person. $260. 50-cent delivery fee on all orders over $100, such as those orders on Amazon.com. They raised fees for fishing, boating, and visiting state parks. They raised the gas tax and indexing it to inflation for future automatic increases. They raised taxes on employers and employees to establish a state-run program. So those who don't have a retirement account, they're going to force you to start a retirement account, and it has an automatic opt-in. You're in already. You have to opt out. They increased the state taxes and fees for vehicle purchases and registration. They have 2 new sales tax increases for the 7-county metro area that total a 1% increase. They spent nearly $200 million to build a new train from Coon Rapids to Duluth. The blackout bill was one of the first bills that passed that is going to increase fees and decrease reliability and the energy in the future of the state of Minnesota. So the 100% carbon-free by the year 2040. A new database to issue climate scores on businesses, that's a backdoor to ESG. They have a commission to replace the state flag. They deleted Columbus Day and replaced it with Indigenous Peoples Day. They granted the right to vote to violent felons who have not yet completed their sentence. They created an anti-free speech government database to catalog offensive language. They are issuing driver's license to foreign nationals illegally. They are also then registering all people with a driver's license, automatic voter registration. And it doesn't matter your legal status. So these foreign nationals who are here illegally will be issued a driver's license and then will be added for automatic voter registration. Let's see. But wait, there's more. Minnesota taxpayer-funded meals for all Minnesota students regardless of family income. Taxpayer-funded quote-unquote free college for all students with families of income under 80,000. They passed national popular vote, which is an erosion of the electoral college. They legalized recreational marijuana. They passed 2 new gun control bills. There is, let's see, outlawed e-tabs, crushing local charities and bar and restaurants. They prohibited PSEO, by the way. So I'm just going to the high-level overview. That's why you guys can go into any of these details. They prohibited PSEO from faith-based organizations. They repealed the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. By the way, I was one of the co-authors on the Born Alive Infant Protection Act in 2015. And now, so what that did is you had a duty to administer life-giving care for those babies that were born alive as the result of a botched abortion. And the heinous, depraved mind of this one-seat majority repealed that law so that you do not have a duty to give life-saving care to an infant, a helpless infant born alive as a result of a botched abortion. It's absolutely disgusting. They deleted the long-standing reporting requirements for abortion facilities. They established the fundamental right to abortion up until the millisecond of birth, which includes minors. They established Minnesota as a refuge for children seeking sex mutilation, chemicals, and surgery. They expanded medical assistance to include taxpayer-funded abortion to the millisecond of birth, so it's not enough to allow it. Now taxpayers are going to further pay for it. They stripped abortion, alternative pregnancy resource centers of their state funding. They required menstrual pads and tampons to be installed in the boys' bathrooms of K-12 schools. They repealed a law that prohibited pedophiles from being considered a protected class. They added gender expression as a protected class. They outlawed mental health professionals from being able to use religious-based principles in their therapy and counseling care when it came to sexual issues. This is just a partial list. And I can guarantee this is not what they campaigned on, as I've already said, as everybody in this room already knows. They lied to Minnesotans, and they're allowed to get away with this because of their partners in corporate media who don't report the truth, and it's reinforced with their partners in the K-12 education system and higher education system. And those of us Republicans, like my colleagues here, and those who are not here, have been fighting tooth and nail. In fact, I continue to hear by some, Eric, why haven't we heard anything? Why aren't you fighting harder? Republicans aren't fighting. We are fighting. The media is not reporting it. So just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it's not happening. And so it's been an honor to continue to serve, because we're going to continue to stand for the truth, regardless of how they're going to ram through and lie and abuse power. And that's another comment that people keep giving me is, Eric, how do you continue to put up with it? How can you be there every day? It's because We need to be there to fight. Somebody needs to stand for truth. In fact, truth, it exists in and of itself, right? Truth simply needs somebody to defend it. And if there isn't anybody there, then the hardcore is going to push forward and advance without any resistance. So that's the reason why I'm continuing to be there. But again, there's no difference between me and you. The only difference is I'm the one that pushes the button. But in terms of the sacrifice and the work that all of us are doing in the different spheres that we have of influence in our lives, some have children, some have families, some have friends, some have neighbors. Each of us are doing our part in this battle for truth. And that's why we need to continue to press forward, trying to hold the line, because those in the next generation are counting on us to at least say, I was there and I fought for truth as hard as I could. So friends, thank you for again coming out. I guess I'll pass the microphone on, and then we'll do the Q&A later. So thank you again.
And Senator Mark Curran from Senate District 28, that's the North Branch and the surrounding townships, including Isante and Cambridge. Your committee's assignments, sir, are ranking minority member of elections and state and local government and veterans. Mark Curran.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, and also my other cherished role is the vice chair. I was the chair last year, the vice chair of the Legislative Audit Commission, which oversees the legislative auditor, which is the only entity who oversees state government for compliance to statute process, and does all of the other whistleblower activities and things that represent citizens. And the good news for that body is it's the only body that reports to the legislature, not to the executive body. And they truly are your eyes and ears and our eyes and ears, and it's one of my most cherished roles. Eric left, believe it or not, Eric covered a pretty long list of topics, but there's still hundreds of other things that were not covered. And believe it or not, in some of the topics, and I think one of the things I want to talk about is foundationally, when you think about how they acted so egregiously. Eric's been a great addition. Now, he said he pressed his own button. He's a former House member. You got to understand, it's new for him in the Senate. Eric's been a great addition, but one of the things that I truly believe that allowed the egregious behavior that they have, or the radical ideas in which they put forth, was truly the thing that people are missing and the media is not reporting, is the rules of the institution. Our Constitution and the rules within the institution are designed for architected discourse. And what that's there for is to preserve the minority voice. We know where the vote's going to go, right? But we typically the minority would always have a voice and a role. That has been removed. And one of the things that might seem really simple, but I think is important, is they changed the rules now to, I believe, unfortunately, permanently allow remote voting in the Senate. The House removed back, they went back to not allowing remote voting. Do you have any limitation?
With permission of the speaker.
With permission, so they still allow it, but it doesn't appear as pervasive as it had occurred in the Senate. Is they were allowed to establish quorum remotely. And I truly believe over the last 160 years, our forefathers, if they believed that a remote element of this governing process was necessary, I'm pretty sure they would have had actions to take and put that in place, or at least consider it. Think about the things that our forefathers had in the past. Transportation just to get to the seat of government, which is defined in our Constitution, and the very nature of having a thin majority. Right, 1,820 votes or people determined the difference between the House and the Senate majority. 170, 72 or something like that, just in the Senate alone. So the fragility of that, I think, is architected into the process. And when you have the rules, that allows you, that requires you, one, to establish quorum, to even have a session day to do business. When those things are adhered to, and respected as an institution, it automatically covers and requires a moderation and a governing across the aisle. Because you had to reach across the aisle just to establish the basic ability to function in many cases. Because life occurs. We operate, we know how difficult that is. We did it for almost 6 years. But it preserves minority voice, and that's the part that is, to me, the most saddening. I've been there since 2016, or the first session year, 2017. To see that disrespect is what's allowed the radicalism to move forward, uncontested. And I think I called it for their members on the other side who don't agree with everything, yet they applied a lot of involuntary chiropractic services to their elbows to get them to vote for things they didn't believe in. But the basic disregard for that institution has allowed this radical agenda. The only good news is we are now number one of the most radical agenda probably in the world from a legislative governing perspective. You think about the laws that are passed. Eric talked a little bit about the PRO Act, which is an anti-life act. There aren't any of these. These are the most radical countries in the world. The only residual benefit is that so many things are unconstitutional. We're going to see likely a lot of resources piled into Minnesota. The national battle of crazy progressivism is here in Minnesota. We're blessed to be on the front lines. Remember, Eric's had a great line. Remember, we're just like you. We're your neighbor before we got elected. We're your neighbor after we got elected. But we sure as hell get to be on the front lines fighting the battle. We all have kids and we all have grandkids. And we don't need more motivation to fight it. But those are some of the things I think that are important that allow the radicalism. So when Eric talked a little bit about elections, I serve in state gov. To me, the most disgusting pieces of it are they've removed not only the 40%, guys, you got to make sure every time you cover the gross increase in spending, our general fund budget went from $52 billion for a biennium to $72 billion. The difference between general fund and everything we spend is the general fund is only the portion in which we get to appropriate. So that's 40%. And the gross expanse is just raising that cost of living in Minnesota. And I fear this high inflationary period that we have after this legislative session is the new floor for the cost to live and do business in Minnesota. And only to increase from there. That hurts our economic vitality and viability, and that economic vitality is life for all of us. They've also put on autopilot. If you think about the wages and the control, the oversight the legislature has, or our role, is they got rid of the subcommittee employee relations role, serving for employee wages. We need a good workforce, but we have to play a role. They removed that. They removed the Senate role in confirming the leadership, the commissioners' appointments, put it on autopilot. I think they'll regret it. They probably should fire the Veterans Administration Commissioner based on the gross failures. But they confirmed it. In other places, they'd automatically be confirmed in 60 days. Those are the levers of the legislature that you have to have control of over the executive body. It's architected by design. Our forefathers were brilliant. Raises, they just got rid of, and this affects everybody. They got rid of the payroll or the salary constraints that were in place for not only state agency personnel and the commissioners that are appointed, the political activists that they appoint, but also for all local government. So each local government, there's a convoluted formula based on the governor's salary and inflation that sets a cap. Well, that applied to every municipal government. They got rid of that cap. So you're going to have to be on the front lines making sure your municipal government keeps their constraints or their salaries limited. We used to provide that oversight. Would we stop all of it? No, but it provided transparency, which is necessary for us to function. I'll go quick, Mary. So that's just on state government. On the election side, Eric mentioned national popular vote. That law enjoined us into a compact that when they get 100 or 270 electoral votes, then it goes into place. I think it was at 190, now they're at 200 between the consortium. National popular vote is terrible for us. The ranked choice voting, we got it watered down, but all they did is create another task force and commission that will likely come out with the prescribed desired outcome of putting that terrible process in place for all Minnesota elections, even our congressional offices and state offices. That'll be horrible for us. They expanded, let's see, election season now. in-person voting, so anybody that's served as election judge of cities and counties are not going to have to staff for 18 days in-person voting, and they're actually going to use tabulators, something we've never done before in the chain of control or the chain of command for the tabulator machines. They won't tabulate them until the end of election season. They put in place for permanent absentee ballot now. So you can sign up for permanent absentee ballot. So those are just some of the things that I think they're all bad ideas, and then the worst idea was, this is the first governor, in fact, his own words said he would never sign a bill that didn't have bipartisan support for elections. Each of the last 4 governors have done that, because when it comes to elections, if it's a good idea, you can get both sides to agree, and typically it will at least be a neutral policy or mutually beneficial to everybody in Minnesota. That was thrown out the window. He put in the most radical ideas, and even worse, in the process, 80% of the omnibus election bill, 80% of the information that was contained in there was not heard or seen in a committee, and was released at about 1 a.m. on the day they passed it off the Senate floor. So just a couple of the very terrible ideas, and so remember, if we always tell you it gets better, remember, it never gets better for us hardworking legal citizens. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, the next three that we'll hear from are brand new to the state legislature. God bless the 3 of you. What a session to come in. We're so glad you decided to run, and we're even more happy that you won. You are now an official warrior, right? We're going to have Representative Pam Altendorf come up from District 28. That's Cannon Falls, Goodhue, Lake City, Red Wing, and Wabasha. And your state senator is Steve Drazkowski. That's right. And Steve Draz has been here a number of times to speak. And your committee assignments, correct me if I'm wrong, are climate and energy, finance and policy, elections, finance and policy, and education finance.
That's correct.
Welcome, Pam Altendorf.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for being out tonight. It's just really important that you're here. We really need more engagement of the public, and I just commend you all from taking some time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. And for all that you're doing in the state of Minnesota, if we could all reach out and get more people engaged, it would really help. I don't know if the people in front of me, if we've completely depressed the room yet, but there is hope, and I do want to bring some hope here to Minnesota. One of the things is in the House, there's 64 Republicans, and 25 of them are brand new this season. And so I'm the first of 3 to speak to you tonight. And I just really trust in God's plan and know that He knew that we were going to need some new people, some new energy in the House. And as they were knocking us down, someone else would pop up, and we would have this new energy that we were bringing into the House, and we were there to fight. We were there to be a voice to the people, a voice of reason. So thank you. I know when I was elected on November 8th and then woke up on November 9th and found out that we had lost everything, probably like many of you in this room, not to bring you back to that horrible day, but I just really felt like the oxygen was sucked out of the air. And I think all of us, it's very safe to say, even though we knew they had the votes at the end of the day, that's just how mathematically it works, that they were going to win. What we did not see coming is what happened this legislative session, was the recklessness, the not following the rules or the procedures that we have always seen in the past. And again, not to repeat, but they do not have a supermajority in the state of Minnesota. They ran this like it's a deep blue 70-30 liberal, very far left liberal state, and we are not. And I just want to let all the people know, sometimes Republicans, we think all we can do is go out there and vote. That's all we can do. We go out and vote, and then we're depressed, and then we can vote again. And we have to really get over that. I really believe there's a lot of things that we can do on a daily basis, and we have to get better at that as Republicans so we can build this momentum leading up to the 2024 election. Mary had quoted President Reagan, and one of the things that I had quoted him is, evil is powerless if the good are unafraid. And that is something that we just have to remember every day. Evil is powerless if the good are unafraid. Talking a little bit about my committees, I just want to give a little bit more in-depth examples. One of the committees I was on was the energy. Really enjoyed being on the energy committee. Learned a lot, and as you know, right out the gate, just a couple weeks into session, they brought the 2040 carbon-free energy plan to the floor to a vote. And this would be another bill that did not go through the regular legislative process the way that it normally should. And why do I say that? It's because it just went through one committee, they brought it to the floor. And something that big, that literally affects every aspect of Minnesota, should have really been vetted out more, should have went through more committees. So why did they do this? Well, I like to say there's like a little evil puppeteer up here. He took January 3rd, or she took January 3rd through May 22nd. They had a big agenda for Minnesota, and they literally had to calculate how to get all of that through as fast as they could. But what I saw in the Energy Committee, and I think makes sense to people, is they passed that carbon-free 2040 bill first thing out of the gate, because then everything else that came through the Energy Committee was justified. I can't tell you how many times I heard over and over, we have to pay for this. We have to pay for 10 million here and 30 million here and X million here because we have a 2040 energy plan. So that was really part of the deal, and now we're starting to see, just this last week, they came out to say that Minnesota, we do not have the infrastructure in place for what they just passed. And so this is just one example of just very reckless legislation, and these are areas that we have to continue to work. Another thing I want to talk about real quick is on the Education Committee. I was on that, and I don't know why, but out of my 3 committees, I was least excited about being on the Education, and I think it's because the Democrats always, really brag and tout that that's their area. That's them. They have education. They care about schools. They care about teachers, and they're going to fully fund schools, right? I mean, that's what they say all the time. And yet, when the whole session went through, we have right now in our state of Minnesota, only about 50% of the children are reading at grade level. 50%. And that means we are failing our kids. And that actually means if we fail a generation of kids in education that they can't read, we are in big trouble moving forward, because we're going to have a whole generation of people that are not going to be viable, productive, functioning adults. So this is a huge problem. And I sat on that Education Committee week after week after week, and I kept on thinking, when are we going to talk about academics? When are we actually going to talk about academics? Especially when our state is at just such a dire need. And it was so disappointing to me to see that that was not a priority for the Democrats. Week 2, we started talking about the menstruation products in the bathrooms for the boys and girls. These are not Minnesota priorities. And for the first time, now what headlines did you just see about the education bill as it passed through the House? Does anyone remember the headlines that you were seeing? Historic, largest funding for schools, right? Well, I mean, trying to teach people, you have to stop being a headline reader. You have to dig a little bit deeper, because and it's our fault, this is on us. We fall asleep. We were reading the headlines. Wow, historic funding for schools, sounds great, huh? No. How can this be possible? We just passed the biggest bills to pass the biggest funding for schools, and the superintendents that I'm talking to are worried about, after 65 new mandates are coming through the education program, 65, they love to tell you what to do. Those Democrats, that's one thing. They don't think anyone can think on their own. 65 new mandates are coming through. We have superintendents that are calculating out the numbers, school boards, that they think they're going to be at a deficit. So both can be true. We can have just given the largest funding increase to schools, and at the end of the day, we're going to be at a deficit. Now, as Republicans, I'm going to tell you, this is an future, and we have to work hard. This is an area for our kids, for our children, for the education of Minnesota, that with leading on this one issue, this is going to allow us to win and take back the House in 2024. I truly believe that, so that is a ray of hope. I feel like I'm talking too long. So anyways, I just want to end with, again, evil is powerless if the good are unafraid. And also, I was a religion teacher for like 15 years. So one of the favorite Bible verses, or I like to talk to, is just one day, is I asked the kids, how many times does the Bible say in the Bible, do not fear? Do not be afraid. Anyone? 365. 365 times the Bible says, do not be afraid, and that is not a mistake. Because it has to remind us every day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I'm glad I chose Ronald Reagan, that it fit right in, didn't it? Yeah, that's great. Representative Arian Ingen, District 36A, Lido Lakes, White Bear Township, Circle Pines, your Assistant Minority Leader. Good for you. Your committee assignments: Human Services, Public Safety, Finance and Policy, Rules and Legislative Administration. Please welcome Elliot Ingen.
Hey everybody, well thank you all again for being here. It really is awesome to walk into a room and see so much energy a year out from an election. And a year ago, when we woke up and we saw what had happened, we thought, okay, we're going to be in for it. This is going to be a tough road ahead. But to sum it all up, 1984 by George Orwell is happening in Minnesota in 2023. Yeah. Everything that's coming out of their mouths is a misnomer. Everything is a lie. You don't have a representative government right now. They don't listen to you. You're the peasants, and they're in the high castle telling you how to live your lives. You're not smart enough to know how to do so. That's what we are up against right now. And when I was thinking about, Senator Lucero, thank you for running through the entire list, basically. But we entitled them the Public Safety Omnibus Bill, the Taxes Omnibus Bill, the Education Omnibus Bill that Pam just went through, none of which were actually centered on that topic. The Public Safety Omnibus Bill, 5-year maximum for all probationary sentences. 5 years. That's how long we're going to keep track of it. We're going to make it easier for prosecutors to only downward depart. We're going to give the legislature no more oversight on Walz appointees that can then pardon the convicts. It's not built on public safety. That's not a public safety bill. We're dealing with something that it's obvious that we're not going to get the truth out through the Star Trib or through Care 11. I mean, heck, Walz's former commissioner, is now the head of the Star Trib. We're not going to get the truth through that. Where we're going to get it is by doing this. It's by facilitating. And it's by charting a path forward where we can come back and win. We can wield power, and we can correct the wrongs, and unashamedly so. We have to not give an inch because they will take a mile. Now, today I found a quote that I know we have a couple others that are coming up, but actually, Pam, could you hand me my phone really quick? Okay. Thanks. This really struck me. Courage is rightly considered the foremost of virtues, for upon it all others depend. I never once thought that the test that we would face in the 6 months that we were in session would be as strenuous and as absolutely life-sucking. But at the end of the day, us at that table and us around this room with all of you guys, we're closer because of it. Because hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and good times create a lot of weak men. Right now, a lot of folks don't recognize how great America is. They don't recognize how much a blessing it is to wake up and be able to say that your politician stinks and not face any consequences, because there are places all over the world where you can't do that. They're coming for that too. So I really want to thank you guys again. It's time to get activated. It's time to get involved. Please feel free to reach out because this isn't just the next generation that we're fighting for. I hear that a lot. It's not just the next generation that we're trying to conserve America for. It's this one right now. And they're coming for it. So thank you all so much.
Yes, he's right. Walter Hudson, you and I started out about 14 years ago and we didn't even know what a BPOU was. And look at us. We're still in the arena. Isn't that great? You're a dear friend. I have fond memories. Representative Walter Hudson from District 30A, St. Michael, Albertville, and Otsego. You've heard him on the radio. You've seen him at rallies. Committee assignments, Children and Families, Finance and Policy, Public Safety, Finance and Policy. Please welcome Walter Hudson.
Well, I am grateful to have the honor of being able to go last. If for nothing else, it spares me the necessity to tick down all the terrible things that happened during the session. I think most of us in this room know a lot. I was there and I was reminded of things, so it's an exhaustive list. So with all those things having been dug into pretty deeply, I'd kind of like to land it here on what I think the ultimate solution is. And it's not, it may include functionally, structurally, things like getting out the vote, finding ballots, getting ballots in people's hands, making sure they get put in boxes. It definitely includes those things. Just like if you go back into the Old Testament to ancient Israel, their conquest of the Promised Land included such things as spears and swords and shields and such. Those things are included, but that's not why they won, right? They didn't always win. And in the times when they didn't win, there was a reason. And the reason was because they did not have faith in the Lord their God. And they were being punished, they were being judged, they were being turned over to evil and wicked rulers and evil and wicked men. Kind of feels familiar, doesn't it? I believe that we're being judged. And when I say we, I mean we. We are being judged. We are being judged. It's not just them, it's us. And the reason why is the same reason that when the Israelites first came to the Promised Land the first time before the 40 years of wandering, right? When they got there the first time and they sent in the 12 spies and the 10 came back and said, you guys, there's no way we can do this. These guys are huge. Have you seen their cities? We have. They're big, they're strong, their walls are big. They've got tons of people, tons of resources. There's nowhere we're going to be able to accomplish this. And God heard that, and his answer was, okay, I guess you can't. And so they didn't for 40 years. When they came back, after calling the herd of disbelief, then they conquered the Promised Land. And they had some bumps and bruises along the way for the same reason. Ebbs and flows of faith. And faith is more than just belief. You know, you can believe in the Tooth Fairy. You can believe in Santa Claus. Faith is taking the step and trusting that the ground will be underneath your feet when it lands, right? It's taking action confident in the result because you know upon whom you trust. That's what we need. When we have that, we win. When we have that, it won't matter how much they cheat. It won't matter how much the media is on their side. It won't matter the institutional and technical and political advantages they have. The walls of Jericho will fall. And the city will burn. And we will advance to that which has been promised. That's where this should land. And I hope that's what you take away from tonight. And if you got questions about legislation, we can take those in the Q&A. Thanks.
Now the Sophia Walter Hudson.
See, Walter Hudson and I started out with the Tea Party movement. He had the Maple Grove Tea Party Patriots, and I had the North Metro Tea Party Patriots. So we were all part of that first and second layer of the movement when Cindy Pugh had, you know, the Chanhassen Tea Party Patriots, and Jim Newberger started out with a Tea Party group, and Amy Koch's parents started Wright County Tea Party Patriots. There's a very rich history here back then of over 59 groups. So some of us are still standing, which is just great, and others have moved on and done things legislatively and have done other things civically. So it was a great movement. It still is. You're all here because of it, whether you know it or not. So thank you all. So I'm going to invite the 5 of you to come back up. Please grab some water if you want it. I'm going to ask that people who have questions to please just line up in front. And again, if you have a question or a comment, you might want to direct it to just one or two. And I'm going to hand the good microphone over to you guys. So I'll start kind of in the middle here.
Just pictures, yeah.
And then we'll have to share this one. Can you still hear me, Blaine, back there? Okay, good, thanks. All right. All right, who's got a question? Lion Dale does. You don't
I don't need a mic?
You don't need a mic, but if you have a question, just line up.
All right, to the young lady, and I'm sorry I'm bad with names, you were on the education? All right. When they came up and they said they wanted more money for education, did anybody on our side say, you've been getting money for forever and the scores aren't changing? It's not money, it's parental problems. Did anybody say that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Republicans are saying that, but at the end of the day, this legislative session, this is just what's, I think it's hard for people to understand. There was no, so normally, like I think Senator Cran alluded to it, that usually they allow the minority to have some bills be heard and to have a little bit more voice, a little bit more participation. What we saw this year is in most committees, Republican bills weren't even heard. And so even though we did have bills like that with parental choice and moving towards that in education, they're just blocking all of the conservative ideas. So was it said? Absolutely, but could we get any leverage or any movement? We just could not this session.
It was not an attack, because I understand that you guys were outgunned all the time. Some of the time you weren't even given opportunities to speak or interject. I understand the rest of that. You were on the energy also?
Yes, sir.
All right. I spent a little bit of time working for MnDOT, and my NSP bill or XL bill says, hey, we want to charge you, house customers, to put electric charging stations all around the state. And then I heard that, well, MnDOT is going to put up the charging stations. Is that true?
Probably in some. There are so many hundreds upon hundreds of provisions that pass. I'm sure that each of us maybe have a little bit of bits and pieces on several of them, but to know all the details and specifics, I certainly know it was just an overwhelming avalanche of garbage. So we don't have all the specifics, but on that topic, I can tell you they did pass a tremendous amount of mandates, legislation that is going to roll out their idea of a future energy for Minnesota, which is actually going to put us in a blackout and brownout and reduce reliability while increasing costs. And so I have no doubt that some version of that is probably true. Again, it's take your worst concepts of what they could have put forth and then go further. And that's what they did.
Hi, I'm Lynn Wilson from North Branch. I have to sneak this thing, not yet. What about COVID? Okay, especially for those of you who have been there a while, you have relationships with people across the aisle. You've got colleagues that you have gotten along with in the past. What, behind the scenes, have you heard from any of these people regarding their own frustration at what has been forced on them? Is there anything coming down like, hey, we're gonna switch sides, or hey, we didn't want to do this. And I have heard some of the horror stories about how some of those who were tempted to vote with the Republicans were threatened and were stood around and all that kind of stuff. So if any of you have had any behind the scenes conversations with your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I cannot believe that they are all that terrible. All of them. Some of them, yes, but not all of them.
I mean, I'll go first. They clearly are. And, well, you can't mince words. I mean, when you think about those things, we've all had the conversations. Now, I can tell you the greater share of the body on the other side has no interest in working across the aisle or even having a conversation or building a relationship. But every one of those major issues, like I said, I call it, they applied a lot of involuntary chiropractic services to their elbows. They did, and they went through it. We have some that are very close friends. When you think about pro-life, that were pro-life, and they voted for every one of those heinous bills. So the hope that one of them is going to peel off, that's not hope. It's denying reality. They've been able to leverage everything they have because they're ruthless. They've decided that 3 or 4 of their members are expendable to get this agenda across, period. So you think the best of people. They just think we're terrible people with also bad ideas, but they have no regard. I think one of the things that we covered earlier, I think Eric talked about it, was Hortman's quote about, here's the message of the people. I can tell you from the inside, the House and the Senate were unavailable even to Democrats in their own constituencies to discuss every issue or topic. Now you guys might, I hate the term lobbyist, all right? Industry expert, whatever it is. But they are a collection of people that represent industry knowledge. They represent 1,000 things that you agree with and live and eat, whatever your hobbies are. There's 1,000 of them working against everything you enjoy, eat and sleep and breathe. They couldn't get access to talk to the chief author of a bill about a terrible idea, which would be all their bills. They wouldn't even take a meeting. They're inaccessible to literally everybody, even their own constituents.
Never underestimate one's ability to rationalize would be the way I describe some of these two purple areas. The other great term I heard this year, I did not come up with it, so I don't get credit, kamikaze legislating. That's what this session has been about.
I'll share a quick story. One DFL state rep, I actually saw her tearing up one day in the hallway. And I had approached her, I won't name names, but I said, hey, what's going on? And she was a school teacher who was hit over the head with a chair by a student. And she had to relearn how to read, how to write, how to walk, how to eat. And she wanted to put forth a bill that would increase penalties or ensure that there are some protections legally for folks like teachers who are being assaulted daily here in the state of Minnesota. And they laughed. There's humanity in some of them, but they are cajoled into meeting with every single one of the heads who are actually creating this legislation. They don't write it, they don't read it, they have their printed talking points on their iPad and they sit there and they read them off on the House floor and that's their soundbite. That's where we're at, and we're not going to be able to rationalize, like you said. Instead, we have to win.
Just real quick, when you go into this optimistic, right? We know they're going to have more votes, but we did think there would be some sort of rational thought or some sort of middle ground. I mean, that would be normal. When the Senate offered some of the amendments on the abortion bill, on SF1, and if you haven't read them, I would recommend pulling them up and literally having them printed. Because when I heard the amendments, and they voted lockstep on some of the amendments, one was, they worked their way up, let's ban abortion at 18 weeks, then 21 weeks, 24 weeks, 40 weeks. One of the amendments was, let's ban abortion if the mother is in active labor. That was an amendment. They voted no. One of the amendments was, let's give anesthesia to a third trimester baby so that they don't feel pain. That seems pretty reasonable, right?
62 amendments.
They voted no.
Wow.
All of them. At that point, I realized that they were not going to budge on anything. If they were not going to break rank and take some of those votes, and some of them, go off on some of those votes, I realized there was no hope. That they were, whatever you want to say, they're being controlled, I don't know, but this is not normal behavior to take those votes. And just real quick last, but as we move forward, and again, we have to win, I would say for us, the Republicans, the conservatives, we want to be attractive to moderate Democrats. And just remember, one thing you can say is, this is not your party, because they have been hijacked. And we need to give them an invitation to come out. So we have to say, this is not your Democrat party anymore. We need to invite them out of that.
So this will teach you to address your question to a specific legislator. We're all going to go for it. The point of the session that I'll point to is when we had a bill that eliminated the language in the human rights statute that prohibits physical or sexual attachment to a child, pedophilia, from being regarded as a protected class. They wanted to take that language out. Representative Harry Niska put forward an amendment that was voted 126 to 0 to take that language and put it into another portion of the same law, slightly changed in order to appease them, but it had the same effect. That passed unanimously off the House floor. Came back from conference committee with that language gone, and they passed the law that they had all voted for, that removes protections for children against pedophiles. That's the day my bipartisanship died. I have no interest in being friends with any of these people. I have no interest in getting along with them. I do have interest in them voting for my stuff, if they choose to, but that's it. The relationship is over. They've declared war against everything we hold dear, and I'm taking that seriously.
From CD4, Senate District 42. Not proud of it, I always lose though. So I'll direct this to Eric because you have the list. On that conversation, and it's the whole thing of approaching a conversation is more of a request, but would it be possible to get this list? Because like you said, the media's not going to cover it. How do we build this list? Because I've thought about this, I would ask the people that I think are somewhat sane, say, you identify as a Democrat, but these are the things that just got passed. Do you agree with these things? And if we somehow had that as a formula to just go forward to talk to people and find out, indeed, if they do not believe in these things, that would be something that, I don't know if we amass that or how we use that as a tool to go back to the legislatures that they voted on or voted for that are in office doing this stuff.
No, that's great. In fact, so your question was brought up by, and I forget the woman's name, Katie? Karen. And so she emailed here a couple days ago on that very topic is, how do we get the information out of what indeed passed so we can communicate that over the course of the summer and the months to come? And I don't have a global answer for that question, but what I can tell you is the list that I was reading was from my email update. So every single one of us legislators, we have weekly email updates. And so if you're not a member of my distribution list, please email me and I'll just forward to you my most recent email update, which had that list. So my Senate email is SEN, for short for Senator, SEN.Eric, ERIC, .Lucero, LUCERO, at Senate.mn. Sen.Eric.Lucero at Senate.mn. If you email me, just put in the subject line something like, please forward the list, or something like that. Then I can, I'll just forward you my email update. And I can, if you want, I can subscribe you to my email, my regular, reoccurring email update. So thank you.
Jacqueline America. I'm from the Senate District 43 in C5. Yeah. I wanted to thank Barry for having this meeting because we don't have to meet in a cave yet. But I think if we did, she'd still organize it. So thank you, Mary. And thanks to all you guys for what you do for us, giving us a voice that's slowly being suffocated. So I have a couple questions. One is regarding the Second Amendment. Did those red flag bills go in? How does that affect us owning guns in Minnesota now? And then the other one is it true that the illegal people are getting licenses now? If so, how are they not going to vote in our elections? Thank you.
Yeah, they tied those directly to voter registration as well. I'll just talk about the election and pass it off. But the craziest thing that I ever saw legislatively was their Protect Democracy Act. Complete euphemism. It's the Protect Democrats Act. I stayed up for 48 straight hours when we found out that this thing was coming to the floor because I wanted to know where it came from. And I did some digging, found that Hans-Georg Weiss, a Swiss billionaire who's donating billions of dollars to Democrats annually, he wrote the legislation. The Center for American Progress, his NGO, wrote the legislation that said it's no longer going to be allowing foreign influence in our elections, foreign money. Well, they conveniently left off of that list nonprofit groups.
Public union.
Which, if you guys want to know where your surplus is, it's with nonprofit groups. We'll now be giving that money directly to the candidates and the campaigns of the very folks that we funded with our tax dollars. It is corrupt as hell. And that's what we're trying to expose because red or blue, whichever side of the aisle you find yourself, people can't stand politicians and they can't stand corrupt ones even more. It's time for us to be the voice for transparency in politics.
So let me just add a quick note on the nonprofits. It's something that's under the radar. In the state of Minnesota here, I don't know how many nonprofits we have, but nonprofits in this context are not what, let's come into your mind, it's not churches or charitable organizations that are doing good work. In the state of Minnesota here, part of the Democrat apparatus is they have established these nonprofit entities as business entities. And what a nonprofit isn't something that doesn't make profit. The name in and of itself is a misnomer. A nonprofit just means that they have to increase their expenses enough to match their revenue so that they don't have money left in the bottom line at the end of the day. How do they increase their expenses? They give it out to paid professionals that are members of the Democrat Party doing Democrat-related things. In the state of Minnesota here, there is a significant number, and all of the surplus, as was just mentioned, is given in the forms of grants. So these nonprofits, they organize the holders or the operators, officers, I should say, in these nonprofits are Democrat activists. Then elected officials are creating these grant programs, $5 million, $10 million, and these nonprofits then become the administrators of that grant. So pick a grant on whatever topic. Helping people learn English, first-time English learners. Helping people to fill out applications to get a mortgage or mortgage-related housing type stuff. Whatever the topic. The grant is then given to the state agency. The state agency then awards those dollars to these nonprofits, and the nonprofits can siphon off between 6 and 10% for administrative fees. So what's 6% of $5 million, right? That gets siphoned off, and that money then goes to pay for apparatus. So those nonprofits are helping to fund the Democrat machine, which in turn elect Democrat elected officials, which in turn fund the grant programs that go to these nonprofits. It's this vicious cycle. And that's something that isn't well known about, and I didn't realize that was what's happening until I got elected to the House, and realized in the public safety sector, it's just amazing. I know Senator Coran has a lot more information he can speak on that.
And I'll just add on that, and Eric described it, and what you saw, if you saw any of the headlines about the bonding bill, hundreds of millions of dollars in their cash bill went directly to these nonprofits. And Eric's right, I could call it the Democrat election campaign apparatus. Under the guise that it's curing or serving some great social ill or need. None of those needs have ever been cured, none of them have ever been improved. Not only are they feeding themselves, but the people they're feeding are to make sure they're continually dependent on that resource, whatever it is. But one of the things we're doing, I mentioned my other favorite role is the Legislative Audit Commission. One of my audit for this year, my choice, is actually going after those nonprofit entities, in many cases receive grants or awards from 10 different agencies, 10 different state agencies. And all of our audits up to this point have pointed to who makes those grant awards. Typically, it's somebody from the agency. It's other appointees to an evaluation or a board that creates the evaluation criteria. Those that do the evaluation are all one and the same people. They're the very nonprofits that are getting the grants, that are served on this. They don't retain, one of the important things is conflict of interest documents. They got a whole bunch of statutes govern how it should occur, so we have transparency. Now, last audit proved that of all of the samples they pulled, not one conflict of interest document was retained at all. Meaning, they're protecting themselves. So my audit this year is to go from today backwards on each of those, when those agencies fail those audits, should drive an audit in itself and start to name and identify the exact people in the agencies, because I can guarantee you 90% of the legislative members have no idea who are the people in the agencies that are running these processes, how many are there, and then I want names. Who are those entities as a part of that decision-making process, awarding themselves their own money. So that's to me, it's one of the most important things we have to have transparency on, and that's why I call it my second favorite role in the legislature. I know state government well, and this is the procedural things that I focus on all the time.
We'll touch on the public safety, but 1 second, just real quick. I've been vocal on the guns as well, and he'll give you all the details. But this is one that we do have to break through the narrative, and we have to communicate the message. So just for one example, on the universal background checks, they put out a survey and they were running for weeks. 70% of Minnesotans want universal background checks. And we have to go a level deeper on these bills because, first of all, there's already background checks in Minnesota, but the public doesn't understand that. And then second of all, and Walter can give you more of the details, but this background check now, what this bill that just passed, you literally cannot loan your gun to your neighbor if he's out squirrel hunting. They would have to do a background check. And I don't think if you would have questioned that to Minnesota, I don't think 70% of Minnesotans would have said that's a good idea. So this is a huge problem, and the media really did an injustice to the state of Minnesota on both of these gun laws.
Quickly on the red law, or the red flag law. So there's two versions of it. There's the version where you actually hear about it and get a chance to confront your accuser before the judge. The more controversial one is the extreme risk protection order, and that's one where they just cancel your due process altogether. You find out that your guns are being taken away when they come to take them away. And their justification for that is, well, if there's a set of circumstances that are so emergent, so urgent, where there's such an imminent threat to safety that we just have to do something and we have to do it now, then this is something we need to be able to do. We need to skip due process, skip constitutional rights, and go straight to confiscating guns. Our counter argument to that is, if the situation's that urgent, shouldn't somebody be going to jail? Shouldn't somebody be in custody and under mental health evaluation? I mean, if this is the circumstance, the idea that you're going to go into that situation that's super hot by their explanation or description, take the guns and then leave with cars and knives and rope and all that around 200 feet from a playground. Not a particularly good idea, but that's the status quo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the legislators. I really appreciate all of your service and coming here tonight. My name is Dennis Hogan. I'm from District 46, which is St. Louis Park, Hopkins. I'm afraid that with all the money that has been spent, all the surplus that has gone, that we did not even address one of the most important problems that are beginning to occur in our cities, particularly in our suburban area, is the juvenile crime rise and the criminal justice situation there. And I'm afraid that with all the money being spent, this is the next big DFL method of trying to create another crisis so they can feed those nonprofits that you're talking about, so they can distort the gun control issue or the gun freedom issue. And I'm wondering if you guys are kind of prepared for this and are beginning to formulate a strategy how to deal with it.
So in sitting on Public Safety Committee, you're 100% right. It's a massive issue. Less than 1% of the population is committing over 46% of crimes. That's just the reality. Now, it's a manufactured crisis that in and of itself, they don't want to solve. Because if they did, it wouldn't advance the narrative.
Right.
The first bill I came out with was a juvenile crime bill. And the next bill that we heard, I knew that was never going to get a hearing. Because it said that if you are a juvenile who's been found guilty of committing a violent act against another, you may be housed in a secured facility. Maybe. Well, maybe it's not. They're creating that crisis. You can go to a facility, get wraparound services where you're given handouts and loans, loads of cash, and then you can go out at night. That's what's going on right now. But even a step beyond that, we need to tap into the culture of why it's happening. It's the family unit. We need to be the party of the family unit. We need to speak in favor of mothers and fathers being there and being the primary government structure at a time when you're in your formative years. And so that's really what
I'm also on the Public Safety Committee, and yes, a lot of what we heard was about how difficult life is for criminals and how we should all feel sorry for them. And they all have really sad stories that deserve to be heard. And the victims need to get behind the curtain and just be forgotten about. But there is a nugget of truth in the whole restorative justice concept. So, like with so many things they do, they take things that are true and then they wrap them up in a bunch of lies and come up with terrible solutions. I think we do need to be having conversations with the communities that are spawning these feckless children who are running around engaged in horrific violence. And they have to be part of the process, right? We're not going to come in from the outside and impose a solution that's going to work. It has to be a solution that it has buy-in from the community. And part of that does involve more than just arresting kids. But it has to include arresting kids. And it has to include, when they've crossed a certain line, putting them away for a good long time, and ensuring that when they come out, they're equipped to re-enter society as productive citizens rather than just being spat out in order to, because right now what they're trying to do is they're just chasing a number. They hold up that concept of equity, we need to eliminate disparities, and so whatever we have to do in order to make the numbers equal out, we're gonna do, even if it includes tossing violent people back out into the street. That's a terrible solution to the problem. That does nothing for the people involved, perpetrators or victims. So yes, we are engaging on that, we are having conversations with folks in that community. We're Elliot and I, and I'm going to send out the invitation to the rest of you as well. I'm going to put up a table at the Juneteenth Festival in North Minneapolis. We're going to have a sign that says, "Ask for a Republican," and we're just going to sit there and talk to people. It'll be fun. This is me announcing it. So yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah. So we're going to move on. We're going to do these four. We've got two more questions, and I know that all of you will stay, I'm sure, afterwards to talk. But we'll move on.
I know that this legislative session, we feel like we've been chasing instead of being proactive about issues because so much has been thrown in our face. And I know at the end of the session, the Minnesota ERA came up. And I know that one of the things they tried to add to the Minnesota ERA is gender identity and also abortion. And I wonder if there's any strategy to get ahead of this issue so that it's not just blown through, because we know last time with like gay marriage, there was just tons of money thrown at it, and it was just looked like it was inevitable, and I don't want that to be inevitable. So I was wondering what your approach would be to that.
Sure. One of the things that I have found in my experience here in the legislature is that Democrats are absolute masters. Absolute masters at wordsmithing whatever the issue, giving it a name or a title, and it's, in many cases, it's 180 degrees opposite of what the actual title is. In this particular case, they're calling it the ERA. They're doing that on purpose to try to resonate the emotions of the 1970s original ERA, which had sex in there. So those men and women were alive and supported that, and everybody in this room agrees with the principle and concept and truth that men and women are equal. Right? We agree with that. But the movement of the 1970s that was the catalyst for the original ERA, what they did is they co-opted that name only. And then they're applying it to 2023, but it's not sex, it's gender. And then, as was mentioned, they're including gender expression. What does that mean? I have no idea. I don't know what it means to express your gender. But whatever that means, as I'm an employer, if I do anything that attempts to curtail whatever that behavior is, because I believe as the employer that that's not conducive for my customers, that I'm going to be now held discriminatory, right? If I'm a landlord, right? So it's employment, it's housing, it's school, and there's two other concepts, I forget what they are, two other topic areas that you can't discriminate. And it's just, it's amazing. So what are we going to do about it? First of all, the abortion, that was a proposal. They tried to put the language in there. They did not. There would have been an absolute meltdown in the final days of session. And they knew that. And so they, for at least for now, that verbiage wasn't in there, but the gender expression verbiage is. What are we going to do? We need to get the word out, because as Pam has mentioned several times now, people need to dig deeper than just the headline. But unfortunately, I think many people are just going to see ERA, and then they're going to vote in favor of it because it's going to resonate with something that's decades old.
Well, like everybody else, I want to thank you for everything you've done. I really appreciate it, and I know everybody in this room does. And I'm going to express my gender. So I'm allowed to express my gender, okay? And I'm really pissed off what they're doing to my grandkids. You know, my kids are long drawn and they form their lives. But anyway, I'm really mad about it. But I want to ask you, you know, and Eric, I appreciate you giving out your email and asking people to, you know, sign up to your newsletter and get information. But I think we need to have a coordinated communication plan between the House caucus and the Senate caucus and our state party, because there's probably 200 people in this room, but that's not the voters in Minnesota. How are we going to get the message out to the voters of Minnesota? Because I don't think my Democratic sister-in-law or daughter-in-law and her family, I don't think they would vote for any of this stuff if they knew it. They're good people. So how are we, as Republicans, going to make sure that all the people out in CD7, all the people down in CD1, across the entire state, bombard the Democrats in saying, what are you doing being able to not care for a child that's born? I mean, those are the things in plain language. Don't tell me to go to the Capitol and listen to what's happening there. I don't have time, okay? Don't tell me to go and read a bill because I won't understand it. Plain language. Get the message out to every corner of our state and to Democrats as well as Republicans. So is there a plan?
Lisa, you know, that's our greatest downfall, I think. The House and the Senate and the GOP working together to deliver the message. We always talk that our media is never going to come forward for us. And so I think we have to develop and use the technologies to deliver that message ourselves. And so everybody has to participate. Everybody needs to be able to get the information. We need to procure the best information possible that's legible and understandable. It's complex. You just heard Eric rattle off a list. That's a tiny list of what the issues are alone. Not only that, the content and the form and manner in which it will touch somebody. And so we agree, there's some of us that are working really hard to bring all those entities together, but we have to do it now. We talked about one of the successes we had in the last election. We won a lot of local elections because we finally just started focusing on it and taking back the control. We have to deploy those technologies so we can test drive them on this election in November for any local office that's there and be prepared to build out the social media warriors or whatever it is that can cover and blanket the entire state. So we have to do it.
I want to inject here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Representative Brian Johnson. I've been working on this issue as well. The best place to get the message out is we give the information to you guys. We get it to some of the BPOUs that are having events. That's your people. But for you, and I'm going to look right at you, you need to talk that to your neighbors and spread the word. Without everybody here talking to at least 10 people, the press will not help us. It's up to you to spread the word what's going on. We'll get you the information, but you have to spread it.
Just super quick, to Brian's point, I think that there is a culture amongst Republican activists, Republican operatives, politicians, to almost be like, oh, well, what is our message? You guys are the message. And the way that we can actually deliver that is not by going to Facebook after they do something crazy and writing a 5-paragraph essay, but it's by actually giving to the message deliverer. For $5, I can reach 5,000 people on a radio ad and say the Democrats are about to propose an equal rights amendment when they don't even know how to define what a woman is. But the Democrats are all on board. They're marching in that same direction. A lot of the times we have a circular firing squad. The less we can do that, and the more that we can march in the same direction towards conservatism, we're going to win again.
Just real quick, my background is sales and marketing, and I'm not in charge, but the Republicans, we have not done a great job at communication, and we do need to improve in this area. And I mean, I'm talking, so I don't know if there's anyone in this room, but I mean, I'm talking, we have given to us just a gold mine of information to message against these radical Democrats. I'm talking about billboards. I'm talking about that we could be more coordinated with newsletters, and also for the very first time, we can break through the media. We can break through the newspapers. We can break through the media, which I think in history we have not been able to do that. And I need every person in this room to believe that, and I need us to understand the power that we yield in talking to people and communicating. And if we can all believe that, we are going to win, but we have to get out there and we have to get loud.
And we have to donate so that people can afford to do this too.
I'll also try to be very quick. I think it's very important for us to be laser focused on what our objective is. If we think, and this is our tendency because we really do want people to know what's going on, we really do want people to be educated, we care so passionately about it. That was one of the cornerstones of the Tea Party movement, was we want to educate, right? We're not going to educate everybody. It's just not going to happen. People have to want to learn. The people who don't want help aren't going to be helped. What we do need to do is get ballots in boxes. And so the task and objective is to spend precisely the amount of time required to convince somebody to sign up for a ballot, and then precisely the amount of time to collect it once they've filled it out. And whatever their trigger is, whatever their button is, whether it's abortion, blackout bill, or whatever it is, we talk about that, sign up, check the box, move on. That's the objective. It's much simpler than we're going to educate the world.
I'm Marcia from Senate District 8.
Can't hear you.
Right, and then you go down to District, right, I'm gonna eat it.
I'll just yell at you. So, I'm from the north,
It's been so bad up there for so many years. I worked on 2 candidates this year. I want you to realize you have a free service, excuse me, in most of your communities. It's called PAC Television, and that camera is free of charge for me to film. I put it up on the channel. I have my own program, and then I put it on YouTube. I'm going to Rumble because they like to take down stuff. So, the reason for telling you this is, do you know how many generations can't read a newspaper?
About 3.
Do you know how many kids are in chaotic classrooms, teachers being abused? My granddaughter, 17 years old, Coon Rapids High School, was told to go home and finish her education. 17 years old. Why can't she finish her education at Coon Rapids? It's so chaotic she can't learn. Do you think she's the only one that can't learn? No. I went to a store in Superior, Wisconsin. Young girl, I said, I'm going to pay you $13.69 for your, it costs $13.69. I gave her a $20 bill. She couldn't make change. Do you have a question? I said, so, yes I do. So, I told her what to do. She said, I said, so are you a public indoctrinated kid? And she said, not anymore. I finally got it, and now I'm learning at home. Home education. Now, what can you do when you have an educational system that's not educating our children?
The homeschooling movement is one of the fastest growing in the country, in the state of Minnesota. And one of the silver linings of the COVID experience is that parents were able to look over the shoulders of the children. They saw the type of disgusting content that is anti-family values that is being taught to their children. They opened up the eyes of parents, and as a result, parents are pulling their children out of the, I don't call them public schools, I say government schools. They're pulling them out of the government schools and coming up with these alternatives, private or otherwise. Private is going away, just a little bit at a slower pace as the government schools, many of them, so just be careful. But the homeschooling movement is, before COVID, was very large in Minnesota. There are incredible support resources out there because of the number of people in that movement in the state of Minnesota. Post-COVID here, it's even enhanced. So that's where we're going. Parents are waking up, and it's a huge, again, silver lining of the year.
20 years I home educated.
Hi guys, I want to thank you for coming too. It's really great to have you here. In my lifetime, I've seen a lot of Republican-dominated houses fall apart because they couldn't corral all the Republicans to march in lockstep. You may not want to talk about this, but I'm very curious if you guys can tell me what the DFL used for tools to get their legislators in lockstep for this whole session. It was a fantastic effort, but how did they do that?
So just very briefly, I will say this. That is one of the things that we have an inherent disadvantage on our side. The worldview, generally speaking now, the difference in worldviews of the left and the right are the left are more collectivist and uniform and groupthink in their mentality. Those on the right were more independent spirited. We want to do things on our own. And so those on the right, it is absolutely, it's a very real challenge to group us together and just to get us to fall in line because we have that independent streak among us. On the left, they can corral easier because the group, the collective means more than the individual, and therefore I'm going to fall in line. Again, that's just the short answer.
And to that point, that's also appealing for our side. The fact that we're able to think different thoughts and be our own people, that's actually one of our strengths as much as it is our weakness. But the Democrats, they're using their own fear from the base to corral people into voting a way that even goes against their values, like we heard in the past. That's going to continue to the point where they're pushing people to our side. I mean, look at Bill Maher. The guy's been trashing Republicans for over 40 years. You watch Bill Maher today, he's sounding like one of us. He made one comment about how Joe Biden fell up a flight of stairs and they tried to cancel him. I mean, the more that they do that, the more we can be a big tent party and not just a circus tent party. We can invite more people to the movement and say, hey, if they're throwing you to the wayside, there's plenty of room in here for you.
Is that how they're justifying the tax increases? Because I'm curious what goes on the floors when they're out there saying why we need all these increased taxes. Is there a common theme at all? Why do they say we need all this?
Equity.
Equity.
It's all about equity, it's all about disparities, it's all about evening out outcomes, it's all about making sure, it's all about making sure that nobody is doing better than anybody else, and that's a perfect narrative for them because it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. They're never going to get there, and so they'll always have justification for going more and more and more.
Craig Conrad, 36 family sites, Whitewater and Oakdale. Just a question, there's always one who gets continually disappointed in our government, especially the conservative side, voting in the last spell stole my thunder. But we have to live with these rules, I bet, for the next 3 years, right? We're stuck with them?
Yep.
And my problem is what happens to Republicans or conservatives, after 3 years of stuff in law, no one will want to touch it. So please encourage me that you guys can literally get rid of 90% of this crap.
So, as Marcia stated, I've been involved in the Tea Party for a long time. I feel your pain. I've gone through all the Republican majorities and even trifectas in Washington under George W. Bush and under Trump, where things weren't delivered that were promised, right? I don't think it's going to happen as a result of people taking votes on the floor of the House or the Senate. I think it's going to happen as a result of constitutional amendments voted on by you guys, the people. One example that I have is, there's a couple of them. There's one that I actually like better than this. It's a taper, it's a taxpayers' bill of rights based out of Colorado. Harry Nisk is carrying that. But then I have a bill that would put a question on the ballot that, if passed, would limit the state budget to 5 1/3% of personal income, state personal income. Currently, it's about 10 after this budget. So if that passed, it would mandate like a 40% cut in state government.
Wow.
Something you've never seen before, probably in the history
I think
of the union.
Colorado's, what, half of what we are in their overall spending.
Yep.
Same population.
So that's the type of thing that needs to happen. We can't count on politicians to be brave. We have to count on the people to limit us, and I think that we can get that done.
Hey, Walter.
There's one more statistic that I heard. I don't know if it was Senator Cran or was a conversation on the final days of the Senate floor. So the new budget, $72 billion. The state of California's budget is $309 billion. Okay, we're at $72 billion. We have 5.5 million. They have population 5.5 million population in Minnesota. They have 39 million people. And so our budget is only about 25% of the state of California, yet we have approximately 1/7 the population. It is amazing how many dollars are being spent in Minnesota.
And remember, we said 72 million is only the general fund portion of it. The general fund in the last biennium was only 47% of our total spending. Our total spending for last biennium was in excess of $100 million. In addition, during that budget year, the COVID dollars, $80 billion was also dumped in the state of Minnesota. And that's what helped grow every level of government, cities, counties, townships, schools, and state government across the board. So now, we don't have the numbers for our all funds budget this year, well in excess of $100 billion in this biennium. So remember, the general fund term was only to keep you uninformed. And so we should never use that term without at least telling you what it is. That's only the portion we get to appropriate. And that grew by 40%.
Any closing remarks?
Thank you again, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate you, and we know that it is going to be a future that there are dark clouds on the horizon over the course of the summer. But we need to continue to hold together, and these conversations need to get out in your spheres of influence. And every one of us has a different hat that we're wearing in different areas of our life, and that's how we're going to prick the hearts and minds of Minnesotans who were denied the truth from the failure of legacy corporate media and their partners and getting the information out. So thank you again.
Thank you.